Welcome CSC 200 class. This is the beginning of ex4. We're just going to get you set up, and we're going to start working with PHP, which is a server-side scripting language. So it needs to be running from a server. That's why we're still going to be using MAMP. And what we're going to use it for is to communicate with our database, with our MySQL database. So we're going to be using PHP to actually write some of our queries right in a web page, so we can get information in a web page, and we don't have to use PHP-myadmin to do everything. So, and that's kind of the fun part of working with databases, is to actually have that information show up on a web page instead of having to go into a piece of software. So we're going to start working with that, and I told you to look around with PHP a little bit just to get familiar with the language. It's a little bit like JavaScript and some other languages. You'll see some similarities, but like I said, it's server-side, so it can only run when it's running on a server. So we are going to use MAMP to run it, but it also has to be in a certain place so that the PHP interpreter knows where it is and can interpret the files. So one thing I just want to point out, and you probably want to do this right from the beginning, is if you go to your applications folder. Now I'm on a Mac right now, so I'll show you the Windows version. On Windows you would go to your program files or wherever your MAMP folder is, and I'll show you that. But just on the Mac, I'll show you what I'm doing here. Is I'm going to go into my MAMP folder, and I'm going to find my folder htdocs. Now I'm not going to move it, but this is the one that actually is local. Localhost is the name of the server, but htdocs is the folder that serves as localhost. So this is where any files that need to get interpreted by the server need to be when we're running MAMP, in this htdocs folder. So when we go to a browser, it'll be called localhost, but this is where they'll be. This is the main directory that will have those files be interpreted. Now, since we have to kind of dig into here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it over into my favorites. I'll just put it down here for now so that I could find it a little bit easier. And you could do the same thing on Windows. You could put it on your favorites so that you don't have to dig into the folder. Now, you can change this eventually, so that some people don't like having files stored in with their applications, because when they back up files, they a lot of times just back up their documents, and they don't always back up their applications because they're huge files. So for now, we'll keep it where it is by default on all versions of MAMP, Windows and Mac. They're in the htdocs. The htdocs folder by default is the one that serves as the server. So we'll keep it there for now. We're going to have to put folders and files inside of that folder in order for them to be read. So that's the first thing that I want you to do. Another thing we're also going to have to do, other than just making sure you know how to get to that htdocs folder, is we're going to be working with brackets. Brackets is a code editor, and you might have used it in other classes. It's free to download, and the way brackets work, now I already opened this up, but you may have it open to a different folder. But what I'd like you to do once you get brackets downloaded and installed is I want you to do File Open Folder. What Open Folder does is it kind of isolates a certain folder. So what you're going to do is just go search. I could just search for it right here and hit Open, and it already is, so it's showing up there. And what you're also going to do in this htdocs folder is you're going to make another folder. So I'm going to right click and make a new folder, and inside there you're just going to call it ex4. That's the folder, the exercise we're going to be working on. Just make sure it's lowercase ex, no capital letters. And inside of that folder, you can even open it up and have the little arrow pointing down. And what I'll do, I'll go right on top of this folder and I'll right click and I'll do New File. And it should show it so it's indented when it's inside there. Sometimes if you're right below it, it makes it in kind of the same directory as the folder, but we want to put it inside that folder. So if anything gets messed up, I'll make sure you move it later. But I'm going to call my file index.php. You were thinking I was going to say HTML. That's what we normally save our files as, but we're going to call it PHP, because in order to be read by the PHP interpreter on the server, it has to be a PHP file. Even though we'll have HTML in there and PHP, it has to be a PHP file. And I'll show you what happens if it's a HTML file. It just won't read the PHP. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And then I'm going to go over on the Windows side just for a second. For people working on Windows, I'll just show you the same thing. If you go into your local disk, now I'm on Windows 7, but however you get to your local disk and you find where MAMP is that you installed, because I'm assuming you've installed MAMP already if you've been working on databases, and I'm going to go inside MAMP and I'll find an htdocs, and it's probably empty, although you might have done other things in there if you've worked with WordPress or anything. So, but what you can do, now in Windows 7 you could do this, you can drag this right on top of favorites, and add it there. So it's kind of a shortcut, so you don't have to keep digging in there. That's just the same thing I did on the Mac, but it works the same way. This htdocs will be your kind of main directory that will be interpreted, and that'll be seen as localhost. And I just want to point out something too. I'll go back to my Mac side right now. Now I'm going to launch MAMP, or it looks like it is running already. MAMP's running already, but I'm going to open up the start page. Make sure you start your servers, but mine are running. I'm going to open up the start page. Now when I open up the start page, it usually comes to here, and I could see my information, and this is kind of important. You could see that the host name, the server name, is called localhost, lowercase, so we're going to be using that, and also the user and the password is root and root. That's by default. The port is 3306. That shouldn't matter a whole lot right now. If you're the only way that would be different if you're on a Mac. You might have it 8888, which would mean things might be a little bit different, but I'll point that out. It's not a big deal. I put mine to 3306, so it would be the same as on Windows. Now on a Mac, I could go to my website. Now when I go to my website, I'm seeing index of, and it's actually showing me that directory. You can see it saying localhost. Now nothing's really going to be in here right now because I didn't do anything yet, but it's showing me what's in here. And if I go to Windows, and I'll do the same thing, I'll launch MAMP, I'll start my servers, open my start page. Now everything looks the same on Windows. I'm on the Windows side now. You can see 3306, root for username and password. There's where I click on phpMyAdmin. I could open that up. Now up here it's saying localhost MAMP. Now it does not have a My Website button. For some reason it just doesn't have a link for that, and I've looked in all these different places, it doesn't. So when you need to get to localhost here, the only thing you need to do is just backspace or just wipe out what's in front of it and just make sure you go to localhost, and then it'll say index of. Now there's nothing listed here because I didn't put anything in here yet. Go back to the Mac side again, and what we're going to be doing, and you can see now it's because I created an ex4 folder, I'm seeing one. But what we're going to do to start, to put some content in there, I'll go back to brackets because there's nothing to see in there. Here's my index.php, and what I'll recommend that you do is go to the W3 schools. Here's W3 schools, and go to the PHP site. And again, there's information that you should check out here, but I'm going to go to the PHP syntax, and there's one of those little start windows like you'll see for some other areas. And what I'm going to do is I'll just hit run example. And it's just showing an example of how PHP works, and you could see the PHP tags. It's just putting hello world on an HTML page. But I'm just going to copy this code, just the HTML code, just so we don't have to retype it. And I'm going to go to brackets, and I'll paste it in there, and it's color-coded because I already named my page index.php, or if it was HTML it would be color-coded. So you could see that the PHP code is actually color-coded. It's saying echo hello world. And the other HTML is just kind of blue and black. You know, that's all you have to know right now about PHP is that there's an opening tag that has a less than sign, a question mark in PHP, and then it closes with a question mark and a greater than sign. And everything in there is PHP code, and it's only recognized once we are putting it in our htdocs and it's being interpreted by the PHP interpreter. So I guess I could save this, and I could go back and I could view my page. And again, if I couldn't see this page, if I didn't know where this page was on the Mac, I could hit my website. On Windows, you just have to make sure it said localhost. So I could even do that. I'll just wipe this out and just put in localhost, and there it goes to ex4, and now that's the folder. And if your index page is inside there, you won't see the page yet until you click on the folder, and there it says hello world. And now that's all that is. Now, one thing we'll also do is we'll go to view developer. Now on Chrome we'll do view developer view source. I'll show you different ways to view the source. But what it actually does is it generates HTML code. That's what PHP does. It actually generates like kind of new HTML code. So when we do a query of a database and we see everything on the page, it'll be a new HTML page, but it won't be permanent. It'll just be temporary in the browser. Getting back to this, that's what we did so far, and that's pretty boring. Now one thing I'd like you to do to start, and then we'll take a break because I just want you to get you started in here. Since we have doc type HTML and all this, we don't have a head tag, which you would usually have for an HTML page. Now it worked without it, but we should put a head tag in here right after HTML. I'm going to put in a head tag because they didn't need it when you in that little editor in W3 Schools. But I'm going to type in head and then type a second tag, and it should close up once you put this slash in there. It should close up for you in brackets. And then I'm just going to go in between there and hit a return, and then I'm going to make a title tag. I'll just type title, and there it's even giving me a little hint to click on it, and then I'll close that up as well, and then I'll even hit return for this, and you can see how it indented it, so you could kind of see the hierarchy of the different tags. And inside title, I'm just going to put ex4 my first page. I'll just call it my first PHP page. And we're going to be doing a bunch of things on here. We're going to start off slow. We'll kind of connect with our server through the web page first. You know, we're not going to do more than just this. Then what we'll do is we'll find out how to connect, and I'll show you where to find all that stuff, and then we'll start doing some queries right from our web page. So that's the first part. So just make sure that you have brackets downloaded and that you go File, Open Folder, so that you're seeing your htdocs folder. Make sure you find your htdocs folder and you put some kind of shortcut to it so you can find it easier if you put it in your favorites either on Mac and Windows. And then also the other thing you have to do is just make sure you have MAMP up and running, and that when you go to your start page, let me go back to my start page, that when you go to your start page, that you can basically get to localhost, you know, whether you hit my website or just make sure you just shorten your URL so it says localhost. So that's all you need to do for now. So I'm going to stop here, and then we'll start working with some code from the PHP W3 Schools page, because we'll be able to copy some functions from there, and that'll help us a little bit as we learn a little bit more about the code.